What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka Just 10 More Minutes, aka the Freakin 10. Back again with another video, and this time we're actually going to try something a little bit different. I've watched quite a few of the Sabaton songs, obviously nowhere near their complete collection, but the more and more I've gotten into it, the more that I enjoyed the history behind it. And so for a couple of the videos, someone asked me to go watch the history as well before. And so I did. And not knowing the history before, you know, helped me with the song and how I got my natural reaction. But then learning the history, or I should say, if I don't watch the history, I get that natural reaction. So I thought what I would do is actually watch the history itself and react to it. How it's going to go, I don't know, because this is, you know, literally going over the history of the battle itself, and not necessarily the song, but it definitely helps ties the two together. So I don't know. This one I'm flying off the complete seat of my pants, you know, so I'll kind of see what format works as I'm watching it. So with that being said, let's switch it up. And let's get to it.
I'm Indy Nidell.
I'm Per from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History. Germany's Bismarck was the largest battleship ever built. But of course, being the biggest means you're also the biggest target.
And it was also one of the most requested songs that you guys wanted us to sing about. So we did.
We'll get to the song in just a minute, but first, here's the story of the Bismarck. As the construction of the two Bismarck-class battleships began in 1936 in Germany, Britain was anything but worried. By treaty since World War I, Germany could not have any battleships that could challenge France and Great Britain. In 1935, Hitler had even voluntarily agreed to limit the total tonnage of his navy, the Kriegsmarine, to 35% of the British fleet. However, the launch of the first new battleship in February 1939 showed that not only had Hitler disregarded the treaty, the Bismarck class was something the world had never seen. Christened Bismarck by the granddaughter of Otto von Bismarck, Germany's first chancellor, the ship was, like its twin, the Tirpitz, 251 meters long and 36 meters wide, larger than anything the British or French had. Its 8 38-centimeter guns placed in 4 twin turrets were the biggest guns ever placed on a German warship. Additional medium artillery and anti-aircraft guns completed the armaments, while its range-finding center was top of the line. But it was not just strong offensively. If it was to go toe-to-toe with French battleships, as had seemed the most logical enemy in 1936, it had to be able to withstand some hits without going down. The main armor belt was up to 32 centimeters of super-strong Wotan steel. Its double-walled hull could absorb the shock from a torpedo and disperse it around the hull. The transverse bulkhead was between 11 and 22 centimeters thick and was segmented into 22 compartments that could be individually sealed in case of flooding.
So I want to stop there because it's fascinating to think about the engineering, right? Take the scenario of what and why they were building it, right? To a certain degree, or who was building it, I guess you could say. Think about the engineering with this, right? Of thinking about things like the torpedo hit and dispersing the shock of that, and how thick they made it, and then trying to figure out, okay, is it still going to be buoyant enough? I mean, because you're talking about, you know, they said it was, you know, something like 30-something meters wide, right? 180 feet, which is not small in the least. And then you talk about, you know, just the overall length is insane. I mean, that gives you an idea of how big this sucker is. Holy crap.
Its 12 high-pressure boilers and its munition chambers had an additional armor strength of 8 to 12 centimeters. All in all, with 44% of its weight dedicated to defense, it seemed impossible that this ship could be sunk.
From the mist, a ship is taking form, and the silence of the seas are about to drift into a storm.
By the time the ship was officially commissioned on August 24, 1940, the war had turned Europe upside down, and it was British shipping, not French, that was the main enemy at sea. The German invasion of Norway had deprived the British of strategic positions in the North Sea. And if the German battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau could combine their strength with both the Bismarck and the Tirpitz, it would mean a daunting German battle group for the British to tackle. And as the battle for Britain raged in the air, German submarines targeted shipping in the Atlantic, Britain's lifeline. If such a battle group joined the hunt for freighters bound for Britain, Britain could be starved into submission. Food rationing had already been imposed on the British public, and the German subs operating from French ports sank over 260,000 tons of shipping in August alone. This was exactly what Admiral Erich Raeder of the Kriegsmarine had in mind when he gave command of the Bismarck to Admiral Günther Lutyens. Second in command was Ernst Lindemann. The crew, over 2,000 strong, was not conscripts but volunteers from all over Germany. They were top-notch men. In the Baltic Sea, the Bismarck had its first training exercise against a mock battle cruiser, Hood. HMS Hood, built at the end of the First World War, was for a long time the British flagship and symbolized the might of the Royal Navy. The first tests were favorable. The Bismarck could reach a top speed of 30.8 knots and outrun any potential threat. But
for that size,
there were two weaknesses. First, the recoil of the heavy guns was extreme, and it was uncertain if, under combat conditions, the force of the naval guns firing would harm the ship's equipment. The second weakness showed during a simulated rudder failure. Without rudders, it was very hard to maneuver the ship. Well, rudders and propellers were always a weakness on any ship, though, and the German Admiralty dismissed the problem, since hitting the rudder during combat was extremely unlikely. By April 1941, the Bismarck was ready for combat. It was
okay, so that's another part of this is the engineering, right? And thinking about trying to maneuver something that big at those speeds and talking about under combat and without the rudders, that it was hard. Because it would be. I mean, just, I think about just a simple, fishing boat. I mean, without the rudders, yeah, you're not really going to be able to do a lot. It fascinates me, though. I mean, you're talking about, right, it was first commissioned, it was like 3 years or so, or 4 years that it took to build it, I think from 36 to 40, if I remember correctly on there. And it's like, I guess for me, how much was known about being commissioned, right? I mean, if a treaty had been signed, were they not, doing checks or anything, or, where it was being commissioned, it was just out of sight, or nobody was really paying attention to it. That part's fascinating to me. And then this map just gives you an idea, right? If you don't remember a lot of the visuals of it, of just what Germany was doing back then and truly what they were after, this is just a good reminder of it and what could have been. I mean, truly what could have been. Let's keep going.
Was to head back to the North Sea, catch up with the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, and meet Gneisenau in the Atlantic. Raeder gave the order that over 3 months it was to sink as many freighters as possible. The might of the Bismarck would allow the battle group to even attack guarded convoys. However, at the time, both the Gneisenau and Prinz Eugen were damaged awaiting repairs. The Bismarck waited. On May the 5th, Adolf Hitler visited the ship. Now, Hitler was a fan of battleships. He loved the design, but he had no knowledge of tactical or strategic naval warfare. He was, however, fearful when it came to naval operations. On the one hand, he wanted to protect and enhance the propaganda image of the mighty German forces. On the other, he wanted to avoid agitating the neutral Americans and their freight shipping. So the Kriegsmarine kept Hitler in the dark about his plans. On August 18th, the Bismarck and Prinz Eugen were to secretly head into the Atlantic. Those two ships were strong enough to do some serious damage to British trade. It was likely that the British knew that the Bismarck was battle ready, but still, secrecy was the key to success. Until they reached the Atlantic, the Bismarck could run into a British trap and be overwhelmed by numerically superior forces. But you know, how they hoped to keep the largest battleship in the world floating around out there a secret is beyond me. Anyhow, the 20th, the Bismarck was spotted, and a day later, members of the Norwegian resistance observed the German ship hiding in the fjords. They informed the British. Now, Admiral Sir John Tovey, aboard the new flagship King George V, was chief of the British Home Fleet. He was ordered by the British Admiralty to locate and engage the Bismarck. That ship was not to reach the Atlantic, period. Tovey could not, though, know the exact route the Bismarck would take, so he ordered Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland to take the Hood and make for Iceland with HMS Prince of Wales to cut off the most likely path. Back home, the Kriegsmarine informed Hitler about Bismarck's departure on the 23rd. Hitler was furious and wanted to recall the ship, fearing that the pride of Germany might be destroyed, but rather assured him that everything was fine, especially now that the German invasion plans for Crete were finalizing. Bismarck would keep the British from sending additional ships into the Mediterranean.
So that's fascinating to me in itself, because you know, Hitler was a very proud individual, right? It loved showing off the new toys, but this one he was scared, and maybe it was just his lack of as they said, the naval warfare knowledge as to what it could be. But at the same time, he was afraid of, you know, agitating America with the freight lines. That's fascinating. So truly their thought was, if they could join the other ships around the other side of Britain and cutting off that trade, that they could, as he said, kind of beat them into submission.
Spotted again by the evening, two British heavy cruisers, the Suffolk and the Norfolk, had taken its scent. And I mean that quite literally. The Suffolk was equipped with a superior new radar system, and the heavy cruiser shadowed the Bismarck and gave its whereabouts to the rest of the British fleet. Bismarck also seemed to be pursued by bad luck. Not only could they not evade the new radar system, the first time they fired on the pursuing heavy cruisers, the recoil of the guns damaged their own radar system, so they had no idea what was heading their way.
2,000 men and 50,000 tons of steel set the course for the Atlantic with the Allies on the hill.
It was the Hood and the Prince of Wales. The Hood had more guns than the Bismarck, but way less armor. The crew was also inexperienced because since the end of the First World War, it had not fired a shot in combat. The battleships closed in on each other. The first to draw blood was the Prince Eugen, hitting one of the Hood's munition chambers. And then, just as the Hood was turning to bring its aft guns to bear, the fourth salvo from the Bismarck smashed into it, punching through its armor and detonating inside the ship's main munition chamber. A moment of shock paused the battle as HMS Hood was engulfed by a giant fireball and split in half. The Prince of Wales returned fire on the Bismarck, damaging it, but was in turn itself hit, which destroyed the bridge and killed the officers. The Prince of Wales turned and fled. Admiral Lutyens decided not to pursue, but to check the damage on Bismarck. It had only received one hit, but was taking on water. One of the boiler rooms had to be abandoned, but more importantly, the foremost fuel depots were leaking. Lutyens evaluated his options. He had damaged the Prince of Wales and destroyed the Hood, a major victory. Indeed, it had been a lucky shot, and the battle had not lasted 10 minutes, but only 3 of the 1,419 men aboard the Hood had survived. But the Bismarck could not now reach top speed, and his fuel was lower than planned. Yep, Bismarck was always referred to as a he. Lutyens could return the way he came to Norway or try to break through to Saint-Nazaire, France for repairs. He chose France. The death of the Hood was indeed a shock to the British public. Admiral Tovey was ordered to destroy the Bismarck with all ships available. Norfolk and Suffolk were still shadowing the Bismarck, but neither could slow it down. The only ships close enough to do that were Force H, HMS Sheffield, HMS Renown, and the aircraft carrier Ark Royal with 18 Swordfish torpedo bombers aboard. Those biplanes looked like World War I, but could reach 100 knots, enough to catch the Bismarck.
You know, I'm sitting here processing, right, and just thinking of different things, and my first thought was, why France, right? You're bad to me. Yes, you're being shadowed, but you don't know it, right? Because of your radars being off. But still, you, I guess both ways are unknown, so you wouldn't really know. But knowing that you came from there and not thinking that you'd have two ships, you'd want to return the way you came back, because at least you know that. But something told him to go to France. That, yeah. Not defending him. I mean, I'm just thinking about from a strategic standpoint of why would you choose that path?
Lutyens was pessimistic about his chances, since basically the whole British home fleet was on his heels. Force H made contact with the Bismarck May 25th, but the Renown and the Sheffield were too weak to engage. 15 torpedo bombers did instead that night. Such small planes are hard to hit with AA guns, especially at night, and with suicidal bravery they closed in and released torpedoes at 300 meters. The first torpedoes did minimal damage, but Bismarck was hit in the stern while making evasive maneuvers, and inrushing water blocked the rudder. Bismarck's Achilles heel had been hit.
God, I love that song.
Engineers tried desperately to find a solution, but the water pressure was too high to send in mechanics. The situation seemed hopeless as the British ships closed in. Admiral Lutyens radioed Berlin, "Ship disabled. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." Tovey planned to engage the Bismarck from all sides, with the battleships King George V and Rodney attacking from the west, while the Norfolk would come in from the north and the heavy cruiser Dorsetshire would attack from the east. In the early morning of the 27th, they sighted the slowly swaying Bismarck. Rodney and George V opened fire. Bismarck returned fire, but soon 2 of his turrets were knocked out of action. A shell hit the artillery command center, killing the officers. Lucky hits, but decisive ones. Bismarck was blinded. The shelling continued, and by 9:15, Bismarck was a burning wreck. He fired his final shots just after 9:30 as his last turrets were destroyed.
The flagship of the Navy, the terror on the seas, his guns have gone silent at last.
The Bismarck was done. Of the 2,876 shells fired on it, 400 hit the ship in a little over half an hour. Now it was the execution of a helpless enemy. Within the ship, it was pure hell, from poisonous gases, fire, heat, cold water, oil, and blood from the dead and dying. At 10:15, Lindemann, since Lutyens was probably dead at that point, gave the order to abandon ship. This the men who could did, as shells rained down, killing hundreds of sailors. The Dorsetshire fired 3 torpedoes as the final blow, and Bismarck disappeared beneath the waves at 10:40. Just 115 of his crewmen would survive. Hitler learned about the disaster not from Admiral Raeder, but from the British press. The Kriegsmarine had refrained from telling him the truth, fearing his anger. And so ends the brief adventures of the Bismarck, the mightiest battleship of all.
Can you imagine just knowing Hitler's frame of mind. It's hard to put yourself in that situation, just, from the history of him and just how quick to react he was of hiding something from him. I can't imagine just the fear of telling him that ship was lost, right? But again, they did it secretly. And I think that's the key point here is, this is not something that he called for, but something that they did kind of on their own in thinking, and, whether it was to make a name for themselves, whatever it was. But he had that fear of losing it. And it's just one of those instincts of, maybe it was just his lack of knowledge, but that's just fascinating to me from a psychological standpoint. Not a right, wrong, or different. I mean, the whole war was just an atrocity. And I mean, Hitler himself is a crazy ass individual. But from a war perspective, thinking about that, and if you take it just from a pure psychological standpoint, right? Take out the atrocities and all of that, because that's not what it's being. Those were horrible and just never should have been done. But I think about, a person as a leader of an army and strategy wise, because you're talking about the sea, right? You're talking about being able to control that and cutting it off to then take over Britain, and beat them into submission, is kind of what they said was the goal. To have this ship that really had it, you think about it, had it returned back, because the two trailing ships, could it have withstood anything from them? I think the answer is yes, right? So it could have made it back. Could they have fixed the rudder? Could they have, thought of something based on the damage that they had taken with the leak with the fuel and all of that to reinforce that? Now, obviously history went differently, and we're learning that. But it's just one of those what ifs that's fascinating, is would that have truly made that big of a difference? My gut feeling says no, because even if they would have made it back, you really had only two options, right? Coming out of where it came from and back down that path, which now people already know that you've got a ship like that. And so you violated the treaty. Now you're drawing more attention. Or do you go the other path that they originally were talking about and going under and around, but then you're meeting those ships anyway. So in the grand scheme, as I kind of think about it, I don't know that it would have made a huge difference had it made it back to port for repairs, as it was one ship against an entire force. And as we saw with those torpedo divers, it didn't stand much of a chance. So it could have happened on any night, whether it was then or 6 months later. It's fascinating, though. I love this. I love watching this.
Again, the biggest ship makes the biggest target.
Yep. I freaking love this song.
So what inspired you to write about the Bismarck?
All right, we get a lot of requests from our fans. Ever since the album 2010, Coat of Arms, where we actually asked our fans officially for the first time to send in ideas. I received over 10,000 ideas in just a short period of time. It took me weeks to go through.
Because they'd write a whole story, not just Bismarck. They'd write, you should do this story about this and this.
Yeah. Well, some people write, you should write a story about Star Wars. And some people write a whole thing.
You guys, Star Wars doesn't count as military history, even though it was a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
That's great.
When I go through them, There's one of the stories that keeps popping up constantly, and there are so many people who want to hear the story about the battleship Bismarck. I like warships, I like naval warfare.
Yeah.
And for me, this was a topic that I really wanted to cover. We couldn't fit it on Carolus Rex, for obvious
Right, yeah,
reasons.
okay.
We couldn't really fit it in on the heroes, even though you could sort of maybe write it from the perspective of the sailors or something like this.
Sure.
If we would put it on the last stand, yeah, then maybe that would have worked, but we didn't cover it for that.
Okay. This is where brilliance comes in. Listen to what he's talking about, right? They're talking about where they could fit this. And this as a lyricist and as a, musician, I think that this is underrated, because if you look at a lot of bands, right, they go release an album and it's a list of songs, right? Some of them may tie together and then some may not, but they just kind of put an album together. But the strategic way that they put this together, similar to what, Ginger just did with Wildflowers, right? It's an entire story that makes up something. And listen to the thought process of where they could put this. I love it. I absolutely love it.
And then we have the cooperation with the gaming company called Wargaming. And they have a game called World of Tanks where Sabaton has a tank inside.
Yeah.
And they also have another game about ships.
World of Warships.
Yes, correctly. And they asked us if we had any song that would fit to this.
Oh.
And yeah, we do have the song Midway, which is about naval warfare. We thought, okay, this is a great opportunity for us actually to write something unique for this. Because we felt this story we want to tell, and we can actually do it outside of an album to gain more focus on it. And we decided, we went to the studio and we wrote the song Bismarck, and we recorded it, and Wargaming actually helped us to produce a really, really awesome video for it.
Because it is the single. Well, how was it recording it, making the video and everything that goes with making a single and stuff?
Yeah, well, the video was recorded in several locations.
Yeah.
Our main part was filmed on a ship, so we needed to find absolutely open water that would fit to the purpose, and a boat that was suitable enough to carry a stage that we could take out on open water. And they sprayed us constantly with water when we were filming it, and it was pretty cold when they were driving full speed with the vessel and filming it over and over again.
Yeah.
And we were so cold, and with the water, it actually freezed our fingers, so in the end we could barely move them at all. But
the people filming, they were all wearing jackets and things.
Yeah, they were comfortable. They were drinking coffee and just enjoying the sight of us.
It is a tough life being a rock star. Tough life.
But in the end, it turned out to be a really cool video, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I love the song too. So, and it's great that we have this channel now, so we can even explain it to the people who might have missed the single.
True.
So, that was Bismarck.
This is Sabaton history. Alright, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the Sabaton History channel, check out Indie's other channels, and support us on Patreon, because that's what makes this happen.
Okay, stopped it right on part. And so produced it as well. Interesting. Huh. I'm enthralled. I mean, that was absolutely awesome to watch. From a history perspective, learning some of those things that the song necessarily, a song can't cover an entire set of history within, one song, right? Within even a 5-minute song. But the way that it covered it, there was a lot of things that then you're seeing in this history that really helped explain, which again just knowing some of the history of the song makes it just that much better. This was fantastic. Let me switch it up, give you my final thoughts. You know, I didn't know how a recording like this was going to go. Because obviously I can watch anything and pause it and talk about it, but does it make sense to do it? And I don't know if you know, it's one of those things, and I'm not going to do the notifications and all that, but I just simply ask if you felt that this was worthwhile to kind of sit back and watch and do, let me know. You know, I've thought about adding other stuff, you know, like things like the Patreon and stuff like that, and doing stuff like this, because then it's one of those things where, you know, for those that truly want to engage on it, they can. You know, we can do watch alongs and things like that where we watch it at the same time, because that's the kind of interaction that I truly like, is, you know, whether it's on a Discord server, where we're watching it, you know, and recording at the same time, and getting everybody's thoughts and having an open discussion on it. You know, those are kind of the things I've thrown around because I want to make this worthwhile. It's worthwhile to me. I can go watch this offline and gain a lot of information. But again, it's the joint experience of this. For those that may have not seen the video, that, you know, are subscribers that haven't dove into the Sabaton history. Because I not only wanted to benefit me, I wanted to benefit everybody, right? That's kind of my purpose with this. This was really cool. This actually, I mean, it just the part about returning the way it came versus going to France and going into the unknown. That part's fascinating to me, because you you know where you've come from, right? Yeah. I mean, again, I could talk about this and just and maybe y'all have more information that they didn't cover. Let me know. It's, yeah, I'm truly fascinated by that part of going into the unknown, where you don't know what lies ahead versus going back. You know, regardless of those two ships. So yeah, in the comments, let me know, because we can have a discussion there about it. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a little bit of a longer video, so, you know, hopefully you get through it. I appreciate it greatly. Always remember, my friends, if someone asks you to stop what you're doing, don't ask for 1, don't ask for 2, and certainly don't ask for 5. If someone asks you to stop what you're doing, always ask for just 10 more minutes. I'm JTMM. I'm out.